And we're live. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another on.net Live. My name is Cecil Phillips. And today's going to be really cool because we're going to be learning about performance and load testing using this really cool open source project called K6. And I have some friends here from the team. We talk us all about how we could start using this tool to performance and load test our .NET application. So why don't we start off with a round of introductions? Laura, why don't we start with you? Why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what do you do?
So yeah, hi, my name is Flor. I am based in the Netherlands and I'm a technical program manager at K6. I joined in June this year, just before we announced the Grafana acquisition of K6. So that's was definitely an interesting time to join and onboard on both K6 and Grafana Labs. Before K6, I actually worked at Microsoft in the same team as Cecile. So that's funny to be sort of back and have a homecoming party, I hope.
I know you abandoned me, but it's okay. I'm not mad about it at all.
I feel bad about it, though. That doesn't make it better.
It's all good, though. It's all good. Simme, why don't we have you come on and tell us a little bit who you are?
So my name is Aronsson, or Simme. I live in Sweden, and I work as a developer advocate at K6. I've been in the company for about almost 2 years. Been doing developer advocacy around the performance testing tool and about the open source offering mainly.
Nice. And so you mentioned, you guys are definitely not where I am. I'm in Florida at the moment. So I'm in the United States, in Florida, where it's definitely very rainy and definitely a little bit overcast. But I know we have a lot of folks in the audience that are from all these really amazing parts of the world. So I always like to take a moment for the show to kind of just see where everyone's calling in from, where they're watching from, and kind of just acknowledge some of these really cool companies. These really cool countries. So as I'm looking in the chat right now, it looks like we have some folks from the Netherlands too. So definitely shout out to the folks from the Netherlands. I see some folks here from Poland as well. So there you go. And here we go. We have some folks from Brazil. There you go. Daniel Reese, it looks like. And here we go. No, North Sentinel Island. So last week, someone was like, they're from North Sentinel Island. And I had no idea where this was. I had to go look it up. But I looked it up on
the map.
Yeah, I looked it up on the maps because I had no idea what this was. I'd never heard about that country before, but it looks absolutely amazing and beautiful. Hopefully one day we'll be able to go and visit there sometime when it's safe. But here we go. We have Italy, we have the UK, Arizona, Colorado, Germany. We have some folks here from Iran. Definitely shout out to Iran. We have France. Some folks here from Dallas, Texas, Sierra Leone. Algeria, Dallas. Again, we have folks coming in from all over the place. Some more folks from Brazil too. Yeah, we definitely really appreciate everyone that's always here. Now, this is a live session, so definitely feel free to go ahead and use the chat. Ask any questions you might have. We're going to be talking about load testing. We're going to be talking about performance testing with K6. But before we do that, I definitely want to share my screen and talk to you about some of the really cool updates that have been happening in the world of .NET. So first and foremost, let's talk about this. This is the big one that happened this week. So .NET 6 release candidate 1 came out this week, just about 2 days ago. And as you can imagine, like the release candidate has tons of really cool features in it. I think once we reach release candidate level, I think we could pretty much guarantee that the APIs are fairly locked in. We're not going to have too much churn. We're not going to have any additional features coming in. The APIs aren't going to change. Like we're pretty locked into what the thing is going to look like. And anything from here on out between now and release is just going to be bug fixes. So you can see, again, definitely some interesting things around Blazor creating custom elements. We see we have these different workloads in here. Again, some more support for Blazor and JavaScript things. This one was interesting to me. There's support here for generating Angular and React components using Blazor. Never thought that I'd see that, but that sounds really cool. So definitely something for you to check out. If you're a .NET developer and you're using Angular and React already today, maybe try and see how you could start using a little bit of Blazor to add some additional functionality to your app. So that could be definitely something you want to check out. As always, I'll make sure that I add these links to the chat. So don't worry if you haven't copied the URL or anything like that. Like we'll definitely make sure that we share these with you. The next link I want to share with everyone. So if you head over to Channel 9, Channel 9 is one of my favorite websites, and I hope it's one of yours too. Channel 9, we have a lot of really cool videos that came out this week. my friend Leslie Richardson on the Visual Studio Toolbox show had a really cool episode with Phil where they talked about how you can do API versioning with ASP.NET Core. So they kind of run through the NuGet packages you have to install, and how can I have more than one version of an API, and what do I have to do again from the backend perspective to support that, in terms of just models and reporting API versions and all that, those types of things. So if API versioning is something that's important to you, definitely check out this video. Again, this is on channel 9. I'll share the link in the chat after we're done. Another video that just came out today. Here we have our friend CJ, and CJ is from Stripe. He's a developer advocate at Stripe, and he came on to talk to us about how you can add payment processing to your .NET web applications. So they have a project called Stripe.net. It's an officially supported SDK from Stripe, and so if you're interested in learning how I could, charge customers, do recurring payments, processing payments, any of those types of things, Stripe is a great place for you to start. And we have in this first video, you can definitely see how you can get started with adding it to your web applications. So that's Stripe. And this is also on channel 9 too. So again, definitely make sure you check that out. And last but not least, I feel like I'm talking about this like almost every week now. .NETConf. .NETConf is November 9th through 11th this year. .NETConf is where .NET 6 will be released too. Now, the call for papers or the call for speakers for .NETConf just closed this Monday, so just a few days ago. So if you wanted to speak at .NETConf, you haven't submitted yet, I'm sorry, time has passed. But there's still a lot of opportunity for you to get involved with the conference. There's going to be launch parties, there's going to be watch parties, there's virtual events. What else do we got going on here? And then everything is going to be live and streamed on YouTube as well. So you have lots of opportunities to chat with folks and interact with them and stuff like that. So definitely make sure you go ahead and save the date for .NETConf, and hopefully you might see some surprises. I don't know, maybe not. We'll see. Now, with that being said, this is the part where I always say this is no longer the Celsius show. This is the K6 show. So let's learn about K6 and all the cool things that it does. Now, Flor, I know you just recently joined, so I think I'm going to pick on you for a little bit. Tell me
that's fine.
A little bit. Yeah, I'm going to pick on you a little bit. Why don't you tell me a little bit about what is K6 and like what are some of the things that it does?
Yeah, and it's cool that you asked. So I think also one of the cool things about joining K6 was that the first week was really dedicated to me or any new hire to actually try out the product and see what we can come up with in terms of like things that are not clear to us, because it's just a fresh pair of eyes at the website and at the product. And I decided to actually go through the website and the product and check for inclusive wording, and also if the application was accessible. And so that's been an interesting experience and something that we've improved on since. Why don't I take you to the website also, so people can just see what it looks like a little bit.
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. So we have a structure where we have an open source project, which is K6 itself. And then there's the cloud version, which is our SaaS solution. So if you go to k6.io, you can find both information on the open source product and the cloud solution as well. You can go to our documentation. When you go to our documentation, we also have a difference between the open source product and the cloud docs for the SaaS solution. When you go to the docs, you'll find a lot of different guides, tutorials that you can follow, information on one tool that I find really interesting. I'm not sure if Simme is going to cover it later on, but the browser recorder, which is very much like almost a no-code type of solution for people just getting started with doing some load testing. If we go back to our main site, I also want to show we have a community page. So if there's people that want to get in touch with us after this this live stream, right? We have a weekly show. So if you didn't, you're watching this now and you want more content afterwards, every Friday, Simme and Nicole, our other developer advocate, run a regular show called Office Hours, where they frequently invite a guest as well from the sort of performance testing world, or a customer or a user of our products, and sort of showcase what they've been trying to achieve with K6. So that's the weekly live stream. We have links to our GitHub project. Of course, there's the community forum, so you can discuss K6 with other K6 users. We're very active on Twitter, so K6 _IO is the handle. We have our own tag, of course, on Stack Overflow, and we have a community Slack as well, so you can chat with us in real time as well. And then we have a list of, and look at this one. I don't know what this one is. You're on .NET. I don't know. I don't know, but it sounds good.
Zoom into that a little bit. What is that?
Simme is doing that one.
Yeah, we're apparently missing someone in that list.
I don't know. I sort of showed up. So yeah, there's just different ways of getting in touch with us. And usually when we did a presentation or we were on a panel or whatever, we'll update this page and you'll be able to see that as well. We have a blog as well that is pretty active. So that's on sort of like the industry, but also whenever we have a new integration or a tutorial or the release notes, really, that's what you can find here. Yeah.
Nice. That's awesome. One of the things that I really appreciated about K6, so obviously before y'all came on the show, I did go through the website and I started clicking around a little bit, just trying to understand like what exactly it is that we're doing. And I really appreciate like when people pay attention to the aesthetics of documentation, right? Because I think about anytime I'm using any type of project, like whether it's open source or not, like if they're not good documentation, if it's not something that's easy for me to read, something that I can get started with really quickly, and something that explains to me, hold my hand a little bit and show me what I need to get started, I definitely am not going to want to come back, right? Because emotionally I'm scarred, right? Like you burned me with your documentation. But I really appreciate, it looks like the amount of care that you all have taken with the documentation. It looks amazing. And I'm definitely really excited to kind of get started and seeing what it actually takes to, load test a .NET application using K6. So I know we have some folks in the chat that are already asking questions, but before we get to the questions, I definitely want to see, why don't we kind of dive into a little bit of a demo just to kind of see like what did the first 5 minutes of K6 kind of look like, right? Like what do I need to do to get started? What do I need to install? And let's talk too about like what are some of those metrics that it returns to us when we're load testing our application.
Sure. Maybe if we could start out with showing Floor's screen again.
Okay.
So we can just have a quick look at the getting started guide of our documentation.
Okay, so Floor, I'm going to put your screen back on. And we're looking at the docs now.
I'm super ready.
Perfect. So if we go to the installation page, just have a quick look. So K6 is available for most platforms or most popular platforms. So you can install it on Linux, on Mac OS, on Windows, or even run it in Docker. And the installation is quite straightforward. In the Linux case, you might have to do some juggling to just get the package repository added to your apt if you're using that. But on Windows, it's very straightforward. You just download the exe and you run. And on Mac OS, it's the same. You can just install it with brew and get started. So given that K6 is written in Go, it has 0 dependencies to be able to run. So you don't really have to install anything prior to being able to run your first test other than K6. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now.
Okay, cool. So we'll switch over. Boom.
All right. So this is just a regular VS Code installation, nothing special about it. So what I would do if I were to get started was to just run brew install K6 and just have that run. Now, since I already have K6, it will probably just do an update and nothing more. But that would have been all there is to it. And once that's done, we would have K6 as a CLI tool. Okay, so now it's actually doing something. Let's stop that. All right. We would have K6 as a CLI tool that we can run directly from our terminal. And this is the K6 OSS product. This is free to use for anyone, and the source is readily available on GitHub, so you can go in and have a look and do your own pull request if you want to or anything like that. But if we were to get started and actually do a test with this, we would first need something to test, right? So I've gone ahead and prepared a really simple .NET application using the .NET CLI. So this is a web API, and we have one controller added to it. So if we have a look at the weather forecast controller, we can see that it will just return a couple of weathers, 5 to be more precise, that it will randomize whenever we call it. So let's go ahead and start that and just have that running.
So I get the good thing to highlight here is that you've really just created a .NET new web API default project. So you haven't done anything special to it. You haven't added any NuGet packages or instrumentation to it. You've just created a default template. We're going to run it, and now based on what's running, like we're gonna throw some K6 at it, right, and see what happens.
Apparently, I've done something to it. Okay, it's already running in another terminal. So let's just go ahead and close that one. All right, so there we go. The only thing I've done is that I've changed the route of the controller and added Croctastic as a weather option. Other than that, it's just straight from the CLI,
right?
Just the scaffolded project. All right, so we have that, right? Now we need to check whether we can access it. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a curl against this project. We can then see, let me go ahead and format that a little bit better. Actually, I didn't. There we go. So when we curl that endpoint, we get a response with 5 different weathers and temperatures for it. So everything is working as we would expect, right? This is the standard behavior of the template. Okay. Now we want to add some load testing to this, and we're going to do this in stages, but we'll start off by just adding we can create a new folder. Let's call that one tests. And in that one, we'll add a file, which we'll call hello world.js. So this is a really interesting thing about K6. The application itself is written in Go. So it compiles down to machine code and is really, really performant because of that. But it also has a scriptable layer that a user will use to write their actual load tests that is implemented in JavaScript. So you will use standard JavaScript to run your test.
Got it. So, and I'm guessing it's only JavaScript. Like you don't have the option to use different languages like Python or C#, but like the scripting language is solely JavaScript today.
Correct. You can use TypeScript. So whether you want to class that as JavaScript or not, right. But you can use TypeScript and transpile that down to JavaScript and then run it. That works totally fine.
Gotcha.
Okay, so now that we actually have created a test file for K6, and we start by just importing the HTTP client that we need to use to be able to interact with the server that we are testing. So I'm going to go ahead and import that. And as we do that, VS Code will be kind enough to install the types package that we provided. So now we're also going to get type ahead as we continue to write our test. So the HTTP client is one of the core concepts of K6. We will use that to do all the requests against our server, and we'll use the result from those requests to assess whether the server is behaving as we're expecting it to, as well as checking whether response times or what have you are within the acceptable thresholds that we set up for our system. So I'm going to go ahead and create a default function that.
And then while you're creating that function, we did have some questions start to pop in from the chat. So coming in from YouTube, this person's asking, is it possible to use NodeJS library with K6? So can I just install any Node package and then just use it?
Yes and no. It's a little bit nuanced, right? You can install Node.js packages, but they can't really rely on the Node.js APIs. So K6 is not actually running Node.js. It's not running Blink, nothing similar. It's running a bare bones implementation of JavaScript written in Go. So if you, for instance, rely on APIs like FS or something similar, then that package won't be usable in K6. But if
Okay.
you have a pure JavaScript library, that will work just fine.
Got it. That makes sense. And then one more question really quickly. I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to make you confirm this for me. So Dimitri Hu, that's his name, he says, I understand this is the on.NET show. I'm a .NET developer. Does K6 support anything else than .NET? Meaning, can I run K6 load test against Node, for example? Now, I'm going to assume the answer is yes. You could load test with K6 against anything, but I'll let you give the official answer since, it's your product.
That's totally correct. You can run K6 against any server you have, as long as it implements a API that is available through HTTP.
Okay.
There is the possibility to use things like gRPC or things like that as well, to some extent, but mainly as long as you provide an HTTP endpoint for the user to interact with, you can use K6 to test it.
Right. So like he's saying, this is the on.NET show, but K6 is pretty much standards compliant, right? Like it doesn't matter what the backend is. As long as I could send requests to it, then we should be fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it.
All right, so we have our default function. And that function will do our HTTP request. So the default function, you can think of that as a state machine or a loop that will just be continuously running for the duration of our test. So if we were to write this out as code, or what is actually happening, we could think of this as a while true. This will just run until the K6 terminates. So let's use the HTTP client and do a call here against the server we created. All right, so this should be fairly similar to what most people are used to doing in JavaScript in the browser as well. Sure, you won't use the HTTP class, but it's fairly straightforward. If we now go ahead and run this using k6.run, followed by the test name, we get a whole lot of metrics. Let me just zoom out one step maybe so we can see all of them.
Okay, yeah, that looks a lot more readable now. Okay.
So let's have a look at what actually happened here. K6 launched, and it shows that the execution will be local. We're not using any cloud service for this. So this is totally available for anyone to use without paying anything. And we have one scenario, which is our default function. And we say that we want one VU, which is a term we use to denote a virtual user, as in someone mimicking a user, right, programmatically. And we run one iteration for each of those one VUs. So in total, we run one iteration against our HTTP API. And we can see that it completed fine. We can see that it did not fail because we have 0 failed requests. We can see things like what the duration was for this request, how many requests we did, what the iteration count was, and so on. We also get some nice information like percentiles, and these are usually really, really good to have when you performance test something. We can see that 90% of our users had a response time that averaged at 243 ms. Sorry, that was not the correct column, but 559. Is it micro or nano? I never remember.
I think that's micro.
Yeah, so microseconds. And for the 95th percentile, it was the same because we only did one request, so it's the same all across. But if we now were to say that, okay, we want to run this for 10 iterations, then things are starting to look a little bit different, right? Now we can see that our average was 417 microseconds, our max was 527, etc., etc. So we get all of these cool stats that we can use to profile our application and see how it behaves under different conditions.
Got it. So quick question coming in from YouTube. Daniel's asking, can these be exported somehow?
Yes, they can. They can, for instance, be exported to Grafana.
Ooh,
That's a shocker, right? But it
interesting
supports it supports export to a lot of different providers. If we go back to floor screen, maybe we can have a look at the list of providers that are available.
Sure. Flor, you ready for me to switch over? And one moment. Okay. Let's see if we have any other questions. Another quick question. How many requests will be sent per VU iteration?
That all depends on how your actual test function looks, right? So in this, we only have one call. But
Okay.
if we were to do like this,
Right.
and run it for one iteration again, then we can see that, okay, apparently I didn't save, sorry. And we can see that we have 5 requests for one iteration. So it's just how many you'll do for each pass.
Gotcha. Let's see.
All right.
Or
are you ready?
Definitely. I'd be looking.
Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure I gave you a second. All right. So I'm going to bring up your screen. All right, cool. What do we got?
So we're here at the, yeah, go for it.
No, go ahead. Go.
No, I just wanted to say that we're here at the integration part. It's still just on the homepage. And if you click view all, you'll get a little bit more granular information also about the IDE extensions as well.
And the most interesting for the question that we were replying to are the results visualizations. And as you can see there, we are able to export to Kafka, to Casey's Cloud, of course, to Grafana, to New Relic, Datadog, all of the popular ones, basically. You can also export, if I'm not mistaken, to Azure Monitor if you're using the cloud version, not the OSS so far. So
nice. This looks really good. So one of the things that I'm wondering, so you showed how we could write a simple function and I could, point the CLI tool to it and now and I could set my iterations and it'll run it. Can I have multiple files with different tests or I'm kind of trying to figure out, like, how do I organize my test? Do I have multiple functions in a file or do I just have multiple files with different tests? Like, how does the management of these things kind of work?
You can actually do it any way you prefer. You could create separate JS files and just import them. Okay. Let us try that out just to see how that will look. So say, for instance, that we have another one called the best test.
Best test ever. Let's do it.
And in this one, we have a best test function.
You have Copilot on, I'm guessing, because it looks like it's trying to write your code for you.
Yes, I do have Copilot on. It's not that helpful when doing K6 tests, but I seem to have forgot to turn it off. Okay, so we'll do the same thing again. We'll import the HTTP client, and we'll do a get here.
No, this one is different now. This one is a named function versus the other one was you just exporting a default.
Yeah, correct. Now we could just import this. We also need to export it from here. Right. Import this from the best test file, and we could just run this instead, right?
Okay, got it.
That would work just the same. But say, for instance, that we want to do things in parallel, then we could also have a worst test. Let's go ahead and just copy these and change the URL to Microsoft.com, for instance.
Okay.
Then we could, in our test, set up something that we call scenarios. And scenarios are basically a more a more complex orchestration where we can use different kind of executors, different kind of timings, different kind of ramping profiles for our load to really do some more complex load testing.
Okay.
So for that, we need to set up an options variable and export that one as well. And in that, we can use the scenarios key. And let's see. We'll say that this, for instance, will use the function best test. And we'll use 10 virtual users maybe, and do it for a duration of 10 seconds. Now we don't need the default function anymore, because now we've set up that one of our scenarios will be this one. I might have missed something, but we're gonna find out pretty soon.
Unsupported type.
Yeah. Okay. So we also need to set up an executor.
So what does that mean? So executor shared iterations. What does that do? Nothing yet.
Okay, so executors are a way for us to use different strategies for doing our for creating our traffic, right? So we could, for instance, say that we want to have ramping iterations, so that we start with, for instance, say 1 iteration per second, and then we gradually ramp up, right? So that is one of the executors we could use. We could say that, for instance, we want to always fire 500 requests per second
from the beginning and have that consistent straight across.
Exactly. Then we could use another executor for that.
Okay, understood.
Sorry. All right. So
the other thing I want to ask you too. So for your scenario in the exec property, can I have more than one function in an exec property, or is that would that be another scenario?
You can only have one function, so that then you would have another scenario for that.
Another scenario. Got it. Okay.
Let's see. Let's try to run this again. This is not something that we've prepared prior to this. If anyone is wondering why it's
you know what, this is the beauty. Yeah, this is the beauty of live streaming, right? Like you know this is a live authentic demo. When things don't work and they break and we got to fix them on camera, like this is not a pretend demo. This is a real thing. And so as you're building your own apps and trying out things, you might see this happen too. It is what happens, right?
So I think we have to do it like this. All right. So
there we go.
Now we actually got something. There. So now we run this as a scenario. If we now want to do the same thing with our worst test as well, we can just go ahead and import that as well. Make sure that it's exported.
And then, like you said before, now this would be another scenario, right? Because the test is different.
Now these two will be run in parallel.
Gotcha.
So if we now run it again, you can see that we have one local and we have one MS.
That's interesting. Ooh. Okay. That's
and
very
this
cool.
is really interesting if we, for instance, want to check what happens if we both try to purchase something from a website and at the same time try to see the stock values of that same product. Then we could do those in parallel, and we could even change the timings a little bit to make them skew a bit against each other or go in tandem. So that's how we would, or at least how I would recommend that we would structure our test if we wanted to run multiple tests at the same time.
Gotcha.
But Simme, what about sleep time?
What about sleep time? Okay, so sleep time is a concept that we usually use when we do performance testing, where we try to emulate a user's pace or a user's think time. So, say for instance that Cecil were to visit Amazon or Microsoft Store or whatever to buy something, then we would probably expect that it would not just be like 400 clicks in 1 second, right? It would take some time, maybe look at the pictures, pick the right product, etc. Then we would use sleep time to emulate that, to make the user's behavior as realistic as possible. So say for instance in our worst test that the user won't visit Microsoft for X amount of times in 1 second. So we'll go ahead and add a sleep here, where we say that we want to sleep for 1 second, I think it is. Let's check. Yeah, second. So we want to sleep for 1 second every time we iterate over this
Every
function.
iteration. Okay.
So if we see the iterations down here, we see that we have 400 right now, right? So let's run the test again with this sleep time.
So yeah, now the test is going to go a little bit slower because you do have that pause that's happening
Exactly.
every time.
And the argument for doing it this way would be that given that we usually don't have, say, 10,000 users that are all clicking refresh as fast as they can, but they're actually navigating around on the web page.
Sure. There's some delay in between, like whenever those requests are coming in.
Yeah.
Got it.
Okay, so we still have 400 iterations because we have a static iteration count of 200 per scenario. But we can see that the duration for those were 16 seconds in this test run. And in the previous one, it was 49 seconds. So that obviously makes no sense, but you'll have to trust me that we're actually sleeping this time.
Sure. I got you. Now, I think this is really interesting because in the past, I've used other tools for load testing like Bombardier, I've used Artillery, I've used AB. I think if anyone has ever done any of the Apache stuff, they might be familiar with AB. But what I like about this one is that, one, it's scriptable, right? Like, so you could kind of control that and manage that a little bit. And I love the fact that I can have those scripts like persisted, right? Like I can store them, I can look at them. And then also too, the amount of information you spew out is very readable. If you notice, I'm a big fan of being able to read stuff. Like if I can't read it, we're going to have a problem. I had to be able to read your documentation, but being able to just eyeball and read that output from the command line tool seems very pleasant, right? And a very easy thing to do. So as developers, as we're scanning through things really quickly, I want to be able to just look and eyeball the metric I want to find and not have to scan through like, oh, it's in here somewhere. I'm going to find it. It's in the mush of stuff, right? So yeah, this is definitely very interesting.
Speaking of that, one thing that you probably usually look for when you do scan through all this information is for green ticks or red crosses, right? To see whether something failed or whether it was successful. Because if you get that color coding or you're able to just quickly glance and see whether your assumptions hold true, then that saves you a lot of time. So we actually have that as an option as well. You can actually add in thresholds where you could say like, okay, so for this test, I want the HTTP request duration, for instance, to have a rate. No, sorry, to have a to have a 95th percentile of less than, say, 200. And then if we run the test with that, once the test finishes, we'll be able to see that whether we hit that target or not. And we can then go ahead and integrate that into our CI pipeline and have that run automatically and quickly get notified once our tests fail or whether they fail or pass.
Nice. I like it. Now, a little bit earlier, and I intentionally left some of these questions to the end. We had some folks asking about running K6 in the cloud, and what does that look like to run more distributed tests, probably coming from different regions and hitting a particular resource. Is that a thing that K6 Cloud does? Not the open source one, like I said, but like the managed service. Can it do those types of things?
For sure. K6 Cloud is able to distribute load over all the geographic zones available at AWS. Sorry.
No,
so you have all the geographic regions available in AWS, and you'll be able to, for instance, say that, okay, I want to have 20% of my load to be originating from Ashburn, for instance, or 30% of my load to be from Ireland. And we would spin up those instances for you and divide the load accordingly.
Awesome. So then it should be, from a developer perspective, I'm guessing I'd still do the same thing that I usually do. Like I'd write the script, I'd upload it or put it somewhere, wherever it is, maybe in your terminal or something like that. And then I just kind of let it do its job, right? It is able to like spread those things out and distribute that stuff for me.
Yeah, correct. And we've actually put quite a lot of work into having the experience look exactly the same, regardless of whether you use the OSS product or you use the cloud app. So what you would do, instead of running your test with K6 Run, you would just switch that to K6 Cloud instead.
Oh, really? So then it happens. Oh, okay. So I don't know why. So for some reason in my head, I thought you had to like go to a browser and upload something, but that makes complete sense that you could run the same command line tool to run that load test. That makes a lot of sense.
You can use the browser for sure. And we have a test builder that is quite similar to what people are used to in, for instance, Postman or a tool like that. So you can build your test that way as well. Or as I think Flor mentioned, you can also use a browser recorder to just not have to do any coding at all. Just navigate through your page with the recorder on, and you would get a script generated for you that you can just start to tweak or add stuff to.
Nice. Okay. Now, I'm kind of wondering if, as I'm doing like these multiple test runs within that cloud environment, I'm guessing it's going to persist those results for me, right? And now I'm guessing now we could start to do some interesting things with like trends and metrics and those types of things over time, because now we've collected all this information, right?
For sure.
Awesome. Now, I'm wondering, so I know K6 was recently acquired by Grafana, and so you definitely spoke about some of those visualizations. Do you happen to have any visualizations that we could look at, like anything that we could see? I think that would be interesting for folks.
Let's see.
As an alternative.
That would require me to switch window though. So you'll have to.
And that's fine. If you want to switch windows, that's fine. I mean, because we could keep chatting with these folks and keeping them busy for a little bit. And
we also just ran a really good intro to load testing K6 and Grafana together with the Grafana people. So maybe I can also share the link to that webinar, because now the recording is just come live, and so you can watch that as well. I think that's a really good one, also for beginners.
Yeah, that'd be great. And for folks that are still here, definitely let us know if have you done load testing like this in your environment or interested in doing it? What types of tools have you used before? If you're a K6 user and you've used K6 before, definitely let us know in the chat. I see one question in here. This one is also coming in from YouTube. And the question is there a limit to VUs, so the virtual users? We would like to simulate 20,000 requests per second. So I'm guessing if we're talking in the cloud space, I'm guessing y'all have some type of metering payment skew or something of that sort that allows you to do a certain amount of resources. I don't know if you could talk to that really quickly.
Yeah, for sure. There are different plans available for the cloud where you have some kind of idea of what target you want to hit, and you will pay according to that. For K6 OSS, I mean, we've run tests where we've gone far beyond 20K requests per second with only one machine. albeit it's a big machine in the cloud, but it's still one machine. So
Yeah.
the limits are really based on what your computer is able to output, or what underlying limits you might have in your operating system.
Gotcha. We have another
But
question here for someone asking about credentials. So I'm guessing it's scripting, so you could script it. But like, is there any particular facilities there for passing in credentials to web APIs?
Well, what we have is we have a support for cookies, right? So you could, for instance, do an authentication against a server, and you get a cookie back, and you can store that and use that for subsequent requests. In the same manner, if you get a token back, you can store that token and use that in your subsequent requests. So you can actually log in the same way a user would, and have the whole thing be dynamic and not just hard-coded tokens in your script, but rather check out a token and use that as part of your test. So you definitely have all the facilities to pass headers or to append information to your test as you go, for sure.
Okay, awesome.
I also sort of want to stress when we read the 20K virtual users that you can also learn a lot from not using such a high load, just to sort of shift the load testing left, I guess, because that's the trend anyway. But just to see how your application performs without bombarding it, indeed, with virtual users. And do it continuously, and not only when you're preparing for a Black Friday type of event.
Right.
Is also a really good idea.
Nice.
All right,
Nice.
so I'm ready to show some visualizations now if you wanted to see that.
All right, cool. Let's head back over to your screen really quick.
Let me zoom in a bit. Okay, so here is the K6 cloud application, right? So I have a test project set up for the Azure pipeline extension that we also provide. That is run on schedule, and I just ran it 2 hours ago to make sure it worked prior to the stream. And if we click that, let's see if if we click that, then we'll see all the test runs that have been executed for that test. So say, for instance, that we want to have a look at the last one. Then let's click that. And then we get metrics for things like request rate or response time or anything like that. And we also get some automated performance insights where we can see if we have any issues with our test. So here we can see, for instance, that there are some issues with this test. It's too short to give a good performance alert analysis. So I would have to extend the duration of this to actually get something usable. But we can also drill down into the actual HTTP calls and plot those as well. We can add that chart to our analysis, and then it will be sort of overlaid on this chart as well. So there are a lot of things you can do to really correlate your data and try to catch on trends. You can compare it to other test runs as well. So say, for instance, this one was 52 ms. Say that we have some that is really that is a bit slower. Then we could say that, okay, we want to compare these two. And then we get the graph side by side, and we'll be able to figure out if we have any performance regressions or anything like that.
Nice. Now, I couldn't help but notice at the top left side, it says Azure Pipelines. Does that mean that you have some type of integration for, running K6 through like Azure DevOps?
Yes, we do. Let's head on over to Azure Marketplace.
Oh, let's do it.
Is it Azure Marketplace or is it Visual Studio Marketplace?
I think you want to go to the Visual Studio Marketplace, and then at the top, when you go in at the top, there should be, there you go. Azure DevOps is the third one on the top. If you click on it.
I can just search for K6 and okay. Sorry.
Yeah, you got to click on DevOps. There you go. Now you can search for it.
So we actually have a extension for running it in Azure Pipelines as well.
Nice.
And you would only add this small snippet to your CI workflow, and it would run your K6 test as part of that CI pipeline as well.
Right.
It also supports running in the cloud, so you could For instance, if you wanted to run in the cloud, you just set that to true and add your K6 Cloud token as a secret to your pipeline, and that would work as well.
So another question coming in from YouTube, and the person's asking, is there any built-in method to display the K6 results on Azure pipelines? So I'm guessing they want to.
Yeah,
collect it
there
as an
isn't,
artifact, or-
unfortunately. You could use, we have functionality for setting up summary templates or end of test templates. So you could use that to set up, for instance, a JUnit output. So you could use that in the test tab of your Azure pipelines to visualize whether your conditions passed or failed. So that's totally possible. You could also, if you're using the K6 Cloud, you could output your test results to Azure Monitor and have a look at them there. That would definitely work, but nothing built in out of the box for the OSS product, unfortunately.
Okay. Now we've seen a lot, I think, about just K6 on the command line. We've seen the scripting, we've seen the community stuff, the documentation, how to do it inside of Azure Marketplace. Is there anything that our audience could help you with? Like, is there anything you want to try out? Is there any feedback like you'd really like to get from them? Maybe I'll have conferences and videos and things of that nature that are coming up that you want to kind of point them to.
So let me see. We shared the webinar. That's what we did.
Yeah, it was a webinar.
Let me see. We have some conferences coming up. Some of them are still kind of like TBD, I guess, with all the in-person versus maybe virtual. Let me see. What's the next thing on the agenda, Simme?
Tomorrow on YouTube, we'll be live with the office hours again.
Right, office hours.
This week we're having Adron from Hasura on to talk a little bit about GraphQL and how you can use Hasura and K6 to load test GraphQL APIs. So
that'd be very cool.
Feel free to join in on that. And
what time that will be again? Tell us again what time.
That will be at 17:00 CEST.
CEST, got it. Okay.
Great.
Awesome.
And then there is Observability Con that is coming up, which is a Grafana conference, and the CFP is still open for that one until the 22nd, so a couple of days left. I'm gonna look at the link there as well and share that.
Okay, cool. So then it sounds like there's a lot of stuff going on.
One thing that we could actually do some promotion of is the XK6 part of K6. We have scripting or extensibility support built in. So you can write your own extensions in Go, bundle them with K6, and have them be part of your test run as well. So we always welcome anyone that finds a fringe use case that we haven't thought of that wants to implement their own extension to test that particular thing. I, for instance, have written one for doing chaos engineering using K6, and I know quite recently that we got one for, is it auto cable or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And we have things for doing things with Kubernetes, with Docker, with Faker, whatever you can think of. We even have someone who did a extension for load testing Minecraft servers. So you can find all sorts of stuff there. So if you can think of something, feel free to give it a go and let us know how that went, how the experience was, if we can improve it in any way.
Yeah, this sounds really interesting.
With Oktoberfest coming up, right? Only next month. So shout out. Join us.
Quick shout out. Awesome. Well, Yusuf, this has been amazing. I feel like we've learned a lot about just K6 and the open source project and some of the cool things that we could do. Like you two did mention before, this is an open source project. So that means that as folks have thoughts and ideas about suggestions or bugs or anything like that that they want us to report, they can head over to GitHub, right? Go to GitHub, or I think you have a Discuss channel is what you showed us a little bit earlier. There's forums. There's tons of places that folks can go to kind of share their thoughts and opinions and feedback. And obviously, I know there was a few suggestions for different things. I saw someone asking about WebSockets earlier, about support for WebSockets and things of that nature. If you'd like to see that type of support inside of K6, use the forums. That's what the team is there for, right? Like send them the feedback and have that discussion online so you can talk about it.
WebSockets we do have.
Yes.
Oh, see, there we go. Well, I guess we have
Already
WebSockets.
solved.
There we go. We got WebSockets too. So that's perfect, right? So you got HTTP, you got WebSockets, and then maybe we'll do gRPC too, right? Awesome. All right. Well, for everyone that is still here, thank you so much for watching, man. This has been a great episode of On.net. We will be back next week. And next week, we're going to have a special guest that's going to be talking about Reactor. If you never heard about the Reactor project, definitely make sure you go ahead and look it up. But Flora and Simme, thank you all so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. Also, too, because I know it's very late at night where you are. So I always appreciate when folks give us some of their later, their off of work time. It's like, come on the show. So definitely appreciate y'all being here.
Thank you for having us.
Awesome being here. Thanks.
Sure, no problem. All right, bye, everyone. I'll see you all next week for another On.net Live. See you.